This is another very new poem, and in fact I haven't read it in public before, and I've been a little hesitant to in some ways. But it started when somebody asked me, oh, and by the way, there's a Q&A coming up in case anybody is interested. Robin and I have a lot of questions for all of you. So but we'll do that after. But somebody asked me this funny question about my poetry, and I didn't know how to answer it at the time. The question was something like, what is your relationship with your poems? And what do you say to that? You know, we get along fine. It's such a strange, but I thought about it a lot, and it seemed like an interesting question.
Yeah.
And eventually it occurred to me, and this actually was really useful for me to know, I think, that what I have is sort of an S&M relationship with my poems. Which is that I'm always trying to sort of force them to be something, and sort of, you know, you who are poets, and probably a lot of you are, because that's the people that go to poetry readings, especially if you're sort of working on formal poems, you're trying to get it to stick to this form, and it doesn't want to be in that form necessarily, right? And it's sort of fighting you. And what's interesting about the poem comes between that struggle, in that struggle between you and it, and eventually, hopefully, something productive comes of it. But there's a lot of pain along the way. So this is a poem about that, that sort of sadomasochistic relationship that poets have with their poems. And it's called Ars Poetica. When your poem looks up at you with those wide, adoring eyes, it makes you want to slap her pretty face and pull her hair, then make her strip and force her into some formal disguise. A peekaboo Petrarchan Teddy's standard evening wear around here. At just 14 lines, it's barely long enough to cover up her volta. Once the table's been cleared bare, the dessert dishes licked clean and packed away. Then you get tough with her. The interrogation light, the wooden chair, her sobbed, I don't know anything, her please, I've had enough. Those aren't her safe words, though. Your, do I look like I care? You'll spill your guts in broken couplets by the time I'm done. At parties, you're sweet, loving, and polite, the perfect pair. Who'd guess at the sick fun you have when you get her alone? She, dressed up like a whore in a sestina corset. You, making her crawl iambically across the floor's cold stone. Refraining as long as you can from manhandling those two spectacular refrains of hers. A perfect rhyme indeed. Black-hearted villain, sir, forcing a villanelle to do such things. Repeating lines entire, or ordering her to read herself while you lean back and watch. But then, it's also true, dominating your sweet lyrics not the only thing you need. Sometimes perversion gets inverted. She's on top, and you wear the handcuffs and the bag over the head. Sure, you're the poet. Still, sometimes you like it best when she tells you what to do. Thank you for not being judgmental about that. I'm going to assume that you're not. Thank you for not expressing your judgments. This is one that came out a few months ago, and some of my friends saw it, and several of them contacted me after they read it, and all of them had pretty much the same reaction. I remember in particular the first one, my friend Mark, who called me from Portland, and left me this message, and he said, Troy, I just read your poem at Lake Scugog. Are you okay? And I got several other messages over the next few days, because I guess it sounds really sad, so there you go. But you shouldn't ever assume that poems come straight from somebody's life, so some of the people actually told me they liked the poem as well, but more often it was the personal concern that came through. At Lake Scugog, where what I see comes to rest at the edge of the lake, against what I think I see. And up on the bank, who I am maintains an uneasy truce with who I fear I am. While in the cabin's shade, the gap between the words I said and those I remember saying is just wide enough to contain the remains that remain of what I assumed I knew. Out in the canoe, the person I thought you were gingerly trades spots with the person you are. And what I believe, sits uncomfortably next to what I believe. When I promised I will always give you what I want you to want, you heard or desired to hear something else, as over and in the lake, the cormorant and its image traced paths through the sky. I'll read one more new one and then 2 or 3 of the Tom Thomson poems, and I'll stop there. Actually, I think they're new Tom Thomson poems as well, so I'm mostly reading new stuff. But this is not a Tom Thomson poem. This one is called Two Hearts. It all began to make sense when the doctors told me that I had 2 hearts. One fatty and red, as frequently pictured, thumping its bloody, greasy way through the life I'd chosen, loving it all to death. The other ghastly and pale, a ghost orchid lurking in the fetid barrens, an interior field I'd cordoned off and walked away from, sadly, wearily, some years ago. Pining away for the lovers not chosen, the towns abandoned to biography, the apartment that I wandered past each day that might have been my home. At night, they wailed and groaned to each other, like the last of their species, separated by oceans. Sometimes they were playful, flirting and frisking like puppies, but other days found them quiet, wary as prize fighters, each in its corner, nursing its private wounds. There was the year when one lived inside the other, but the larger heart had no windows. The other one couldn't see out. In November, when the air turned stale, they told me they were separating. When it finally became intolerable, I asked the doctors to take one out. We'll have to abort it to remove it, they said. And without a thought, I answered, let it die. They let me see it after, slumped like a jellyfish on a tin serving dish. But it didn't take. In the long night, I can still feel it, now even more a ghost, tingling with each beat, this phantom heart that will not let go of its claim on life, its claim on my life. And though it has taken years, I have come to terms with it, this clock of flesh. And if, as they tell me, I love too much, I have learned to love loving too much. Learned to love the uncorrected rhythm of 2 hearts beating, each in its own time. Learned to love the too much of this longing life, the whispered I call, its mates I hear. And I'll read 3 of these. These are Tom Thomson poems. In the first book, about half of the book was these Tom Thomson sonnets. Or sort of sonnets, because they're not strict. They're all 14 lines. They're iambic pentameter or iambic-ish, pentameter-ish, more or less. Some of them cheat in various ways. Some of them rhyme, some of them don't. There's a lot of variation, but they're all about this character, and I don't know what to say except he's not me, which I have to keep reminding people of that. And so these are all, I think, very recent ones. The first one's called Tom Thomson in Tumult. Regretting his regrets, ashamed of his shame, mortified by his perpetual mortification, Tom hangs a mendacious shingle away on vacation and draws the shades, having only his good name, which no one can recall, to provide him with shelter. He feels too naked and soft to step outside. If he could feel proud of himself, he'd take pride in his pride. But no such luck. His history is a welter of failures to act when he should have acted, and, worse, failures to fail to act when he should have kept still. He decries his constant need to decry. His curse, which he curses with all his heart, is to hate this cursing, hating heart of his. Had he only the will, he'd hate it for loving, too. But that takes real skill.